Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Let me tell you about the most fun homework assignment I have ever given: daily magic wand time. It started with me doing a 21-day experiment to answer one question. What happens to stress, sleep, mood, and sexual satisfaction when I use the magic wand every day versus when I have partnered sex versus when I have no sexual activity at all? The results were honestly so fascinating that we turned it into a full-blown scientific study with over 1,000 participants. Now we have real data on how consistent solo pleasure can impact mental health and overall wellness, not just orgasms. Curious? Go to magicwandstudy.com and read what we found. I've been a sex educator for almost a decade, so I know lots about sexy products. Let me share my top 3 reasons I am personally obsessed with Uberlube. 1, sex feels better while using it, period. 2, it's great for sensitive skin and it's recommended by leading doctors. 3, I don't need to reapply it often because a little goes a long, long way. Go to uberlube.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at checkout. Black Friday deals are here, and it's time to invest in something that gives you the pleasure you deserve. As a sex educator, I look for body-safe materials, smart design, and toys people actually keep reaching for. For over 20 years, Lelo has been redefining luxury pleasure, making toys that are so beautifully designed they belong on your nightstand and your vision board. The Sona 3 Cruise is one of their icons, and it's designed for the kind of deep, all-encompassing pleasure that you want, and gives you the smoothest path to a fuller, deeper, and more intense orgasm. Go to lelo.com for their amazing Black Friday deals all month long. And use my stackable code SEXEDWITHDB for an additional 15% off. Hey, DB here, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert. And today we're diving into a question I love because it sits right at the intersection of neurodiversity and sex ed. The question is, how does autism shape someone's experience of sex, from pleasure to overwhelm? If you're autistic, questioning, neurodivergent, or you love someone who is, or you're dating someone who is, this episode is for you. We're going to talk about what autism actually is, how common it is, how sensory stuff can make sex amazing or overwhelming, and some super practical things that you can do to make sexual experiences safer, more comfortable, and more pleasurable. And a quick note before we start, this is obvious, but need to say it. Autistic people are not a monolith. There is no one true autistic sex experience. There are autistic folks who are asexual, folks who are very sexual, folks who are aromantic, who are in long-term relationships, and folks who are happily solo, and all of that is valid. So I'm not going to pretend that this episode will answer every experience for autistic folks, especially since there is such a large spectrum of them. But I do think it's important to think through the details of how autistic people might feel when it comes to sex, pleasure, sensory overload, etc. And if you are someone who is autistic or you love someone who is autistic, and you have other ideas and thoughts after you listen to this episode, please email me at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. So let's get started with some numbers. According to the latest data from the CDC, about 1 in 31 children, which is around 3.2% of children in the US, are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, which is approximately 10.5 million people. Large percentage of children out there. And autism doesn't stop at age 18. Estimates suggest around 2.2% of US adults are autistic, which is roughly 1 in 45 adults. So when we're asking, what is sex like for autistic people, we're talking about for millions and millions of people in the US alone. And as we know, autism is a spectrum, and that doesn't mean mild to severe, like in a one straight line. It means that there are many different combinations of traits differences in communication and social interaction, sensory processing differences, strong interests, routines, and patterns. And two autistic people can look completely different from the outside and still both be autistic. And that's really important for sex because that same trait, say sensitivity to touch, for example, can be a huge turnoff for one autistic person and a huge turn on for another. So, do autistic people want sex and relationships? The short answer is many do, and some don't, just like non autistic folks. Research with autistic adults shows that a lot of autistic people have strong interest in relationships, intimacy, and sex, but they often get less sex education, more stigma, and fewer opportunities to explore sex safely. Studies also suggest that autistic people, especially autistic women and AFAB folks, are more likely to identify as LGBTQIA+ than the general population. So if you're autistic and queer and feeling like the odd one out, you are actually in very good company. There are many of you out there. The Organization for Autism Research, aka OAR, created a whole outline guide called Sex Ed for Self-Advocates, which is specifically for autistic people 15 and up. And it includes a sexual activity module that breaks down what sex is, why people have sex, safer sex, and how to think about whether you're ready or not. And while I was doing the research for this episode, I saw a familiar face in the OAR welcome video, and that was Amy Gruvino, a speaker, author, and autism sexuality advocate. And we had her on the pod in season 5 a few years ago for an amazing episode of sex, ed, and autism. And we'll put that episode in the show notes for further listening if you're interested. So back to the guide. I mean, the fact that this guide exists at all sends a big message, which is that autistic people are sexual beings and deserve accessible, accurate sex education. All right, so what could sex be like for someone with autism? Let's go straight to that big question. For some autistic people, sex can feel comforting and regulating. That deep pressure of a hug or the repetitive rhythm of stimulation can feel calming and grounding. It can feel focused and intense. So hyper focus on sensations can make orgasms feel incredibly strong or detailed. And it can also be a powerful way to connect. If and when words are hard to access, touch, routine, and shared interests can be the love language. And for other folks with autism, sex can feel overwhelming or painful because of sensory sensitivities to touch, sound, smell, temperature, or even the feel of someone breathing on them. It can feel confusing socially, like they're maybe wondering, what is my partner expecting right now? And am I doing the right thing? Why are there so many unwritten rules that I don't have access to? And it could also feel emotionally draining because of masking, camouflaging, or trying to perform, or thinking, how is sex supposed to look instead of tuning into what actually feels good? A qualitative study with autistic adults found that sensory differences, social anxiety, and lack of tailored sex ed all shaped how they experienced sex and relationships. Sometimes in painful ways, but also sometimes in uniquely positive ways when partners were understanding and communication was clear. So the question of what is sex for autistic people like really becomes, what is this specific autistic person's sensory profile, communication style, and desire, and how do we build sex around that? Now, let's talk a little bit more about sensory overload, because this is a big one for folks with autism. Many autistic folks experience sensory differences, being extra sensitive, hypersensitive, or undersensitive, hyposensitive to touch, sound, light, smell, or movement. Some sources estimate that up to 90% of autistic people have unique sensory processing patterns that affect intimacy. And when we're talking about the intersection of sensory processing and sex, it could look like light touch feeling itchy or unbearable, while firm pressure might feel amazing. Certain fabrics, lube textures, or condoms could feel wrong or distracting. Background noise like bright lights or strong smells can cause overload. Surprise touches, especially in erogenous zones, could trigger a startle or a shutdown instead of pleasure. So here are some ways to prevent or reduce sensory overload during sex. Control the environment. Dim the lights or use colored lighting. Use a white noise machine or a playlist at a predictable volume, keep the room at a comfortable temperature, and remove any fabrics or tags. And if a weighted blanket feels good, that might be helpful to you. It's also important to clarify what kind of touch works for you. Some autistic folks prefer firm, predictable pressure versus light, tickly touches. And you can say, I like X, Y, and Z. Please avoid X, Y, and Z. So for example, I like steady, firm touch on my inner thighs. Please avoid light tickling. Using direct, clear communication is really important. So many autistic people prefer direct, literal language over hints. So here's an example script. If I put my hand on your arm like this, it means pause. If I say, I need a break, let's stop and cuddle or just rest. So it's really, really important that we're intuiting not only body language, but hearing the exact words that folks are saying and respecting the no, respecting the boundary. You also want to keep routines and signals. Routines can be comforting. A similar order of activities, the same safe words, or the same aftercare can feel really good. And that doesn't mean that sex has to be boring and exactly the same every single time. It just means that new things are introduced gradually with consent. And you want to build in that recovery time, that aftercare. After sex, sensory systems might need quiet, darkness, or stimming to regulate, and you should plan for that. That's just what care looks like for folks with autism. Okay, so I want to add a few more practical scripts that you can use if you are autistic talking to a partner. And then we'll end with, if you're the partner of an autistic person, here are some questions that you can ask. So if you're the autistic person talking to a partner, you can say, I'm autistic and my sensory system may be different than yours. I like a slower pace. Can we try it that way? You can say, if I start getting overwhelmed, I might go quiet or freeze. If that happens, please ask me, do you want to stop? You can say, just because I need a break doesn't mean I'm not attracted to you. It just means I need a second. Now, if you're the partner of an autistic person, you can ask, do you want more or less pressure when I touch you like this? How are the sounds or the lights right now? Do you want to change anything? If you need to stop, I promise I won't be hurt. I'd rather we do what feels good for you. Here's a big affirmation for folks with autism. Your needs are not too much. They are just information. You deserve pleasurable sex. If you want to learn more about folks who have autism and what sex can look like for those folks, the Organization for Autism Research's Sex Ed for Self-Advocates Guide will be in the show notes. We'll also share some resources on sensory processing and intimacy. And if this episode was helpful, send it to a friend, send it to your partner. Make sure that they know that people with autism have sex and they have healthy sex lives, and people with autism have pleasure and they deserve that pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. Love y'all. Talk to you next week.